Hello, and welcome to The Painful Truth. In our docuseries, you will hear stories of PPCM survivors talking about a common disease. PPCM stands for peripartum cardiomyopathy, which is a preventable pregnancy-induced heart failure. PPCM, it's not rare, it's just rarely diagnosed. Early diagnosis saves lives. Hi, Tasha. Thank you today for joining me with sharing your experience with peripartum cardiomyopathy. Thank you, everybody, for giving us your time and listening to Tasha's Magic Minute of talking about how she was first educated about this preventable maternal mortality disease. What age were you when you first were actually diagnosed with peripartum cardiomyopathy?
I was 38 years old.
And at what point during your pregnancy you just felt like this is not right? I feel just my body is like failing me. At what point in your pregnancy, how many weeks were you?
You know, in reality, even though peripartum cardiomyopathy is something that normally begins the last, month of pregnancy towards the last year after pregnancy, my blood pressure was high, started getting high off the get-go. So I was having high blood pressures probably from 20 weeks on at least.
So 20 weeks, you started to feel like, what were your symptoms?
Well, my blood pressures were reading close to the 150s over 90s. Prior to pregnancy, I was always a 120 over 80.
Oh, wow.
There was no fluctuating with me. But then, like I said, about 20 weeks into pregnancy, they were good 150s over 90s. And I brought that to my doctor's attention. And I was, it's not a big deal. It's not that high. So we're not going to worry about it at this point.
So they didn't test you with any tests because they didn't think there was anything wrong to test you.
Correct. They were doing, the urine sample for protein for preeclampsia every visit that I went in. And every visit that I went in, it was supposedly negative. Mm-hmm. They were not finding protein in my urine.
Did they give you the SFLT1, the PIGF?
No.
The placental growth factor mixed with the cardiotoxic fluid test.
Right. No, they did not.
Okay. So how was it that who was the person who diagnosed you? Was it what doctor or what area?
I'm pretty sure that it was actually the cardiologist that they called in to ICU 6 days, after my delivery, after I had already gone into cardiac arrest. It was completely missed throughout my pregnancy. No one had any clue that I had peripartum cardiomyopathy throughout my pregnancy, other than myself and my family, who knew that something was drastically wrong.
And so you were diagnosed already at a life threat.
I had already gone into cardiac arrest, and I had already had to be shocked back to life. And I was unconscious for a day and a half. I was incubated in ICU. My family had been called to the back room, which, if anybody has any familiarity with the hospitals, when your family all gets called to the back room,
yes,
they're getting called to the back room to be told the worst news possible.
Right.
And they were being told that they did not think I was going to make it, and that they needed to figure out how my son was going to be taken care of.
Mm-hmm. And so, being a new mom, having a baby that's only 6 days old, not knowing what's happening, and what was the test that finally was able to diagnose you? Do you know? Was it the EKG? Was it the BNP? What was the test that alerted them that you were in fact PPCM peripartum cardiomyopathy?
I believe it was a combination of things.
Mm-hmm.
we need to go back into my pregnancy where everything was actually missed. I had extreme swelling. Extreme swelling. I had shortness of breath when laying down. I would nearly, lose all my breath. I was sleeping on pillows to raise myself up. I was getting up to urinate overnight probably a good 20 to 30 times at night. The swelling was so bad that I was biting the inside of my mouth because even the inside of my mouth was swollen.
I remember that. I had that too.
Yeah, and it was horrid.
Yeah, once you get swelling in the face, that is when you're having heart failure. So
So-
that's when it's like that's when it gets really intense. I do remember that. Did you have the infection too? Did you have a high temperature with an infection?
I'm not certain if I had a high temperature or not. I just, like I said, kept being told everything was normal.
Normal, me too. Yes.
I also,
That I was not ill.
right. I also was seeing my pulse binding in my wrists at night, where I would just see it just boom, 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 boom. I told them about that also. I did end up going into the labor floor prior to
Where?
in Bakersfield, one of our local hospitals. I went in and I
Was it
told
Memorial?
them, no, it was not Memorial.
Okay. Kern?
No, it was not Kern.
Okay.
I went in and told them, everything that was going on, and they sent me home. They said everything was normal pregnancy symptoms. First time mom, I don't know any better. I believe them. So I went home, but nothing was getting better. Everything was getting worse. I was just swollen from head to toe.
Yeah.
Like I said, I couldn't breathe overnight. I was up every 20 minutes peeing overnight. I couldn't lay flat overnight. But everything just kept going. I kept being told it was normal. It was normal, not to worry. My blood pressure was still extremely high. I was not put on any medication for any of it. I had already had a scheduled C-section planned because of uterine fibroids. So that had already been planned. That had nothing to do with what was going on with my condition. That was already planned for 39 weeks and one day. It ended up being on December 18th of 2018 was when my C-section was. Like I said, that was planned, had nothing to do with anything other than the uterine fibroids that we already knew about.
Where did you have it? I mean, I had a C-section because Liam, he was breached. Did you have a breached baby, or what?
No,
What led them
the
to
C-section was because of the uterine fibroids. I had
Okay.
one that was so massive it was blocking the birth canal, so he would not have been able to, come out that way.
Right, okay.
So they had to take him that way.
Okay.
Which we knew off the get-go. But that was fine with me. It was supposed to be a soft C-section, which means that after I had the baby was supposed to be handed directly to me. And I was supposed to get to hold him and do skin-to-skin contact with him first. That did not happen. I remember all of this, and I remember the baby being, taken over and put into the little thing that they put him in. They were saying that he was having a little bit of breathing issues. That's what I remember. But then I don't remember anything else in the operating room. That's when all of a sudden it's like I'm asleep then.
But when my baby was pulled out, I have that on video.
We weren't allowed to have videos or cameras in there.
You weren't?
No.
So when you held my baby up, he was completely spotless, where he didn't even have a speck of blood. And I think it was because I have so much fluid. So you didn't see your baby to know it was he?
I saw him being passed by me, and I didn't know why. Because as far as I knew, he was supposed to be coming to me.
Right.
And then, like I said, at that point, that's when all of a sudden I finally go to sleep. I was completely alert and aware during the C-section. And I felt like I was feeling more than what I should have. I feel like I felt way more than what I should have. But then, asleep. So 30 minutes later from then, I'm finally rolled into recovery, where that's where I find my son doing skin-to-skin contact with his father. I still haven't touched my son. Nobody tells me that anything had gone wrong. Everything was fine from what they told me. I go back into my room with the C-section. You stay in the hospital for a few days longer than you do with a normal birth. The first night, I believe it was the first night there, the nurse who was on the overnights, she noticed my oxygen levels were dropping.
Okay.
My oxygen levels were dropping to the high 80s. She demanded that we get an x-ray done. So we did do an x-ray that night, and no one said anything to me, and then she was pulled.
You had a chest x-ray?
Yes. And no one said anything to me.
So they got to see your heart.
They should have. But that's where the whole
Well,
problem
that's what
there
happens
comes.
when you have a chest x-ray.
Right, yes. Well, that's what I'm saying. They should have. But we don't know this for sure.
Okay.
Because the next morning that nurse was pulled off of my stuff, and they had other nurses come in.
Okay, it's a different shift.
But that nurse never came back to my shift.
Oh.
I don't have a lot of memory from that time, but my mother was there throughout all of this. And there's even a photo that I have of myself after that. I'm still completely swollen. They were coming in and doing oxygen treatments with me. Oxygen levels were still low 80s. I'm not being given any answers. The new nurses that I have are telling me that everything is normal. Everything is just fine, not to worry about it. One of the photos I have has my blood pressure being, I believe it was 168/97.
Wow.
And I'm still not being treated for anything at this point.
Wow.
So we go ahead and we go through this. My mother demands the charge nurse, because she wants to see my file, my records.
Sure.
They're refusing to let us see my records.
They did the same thing for us at Cedars-Sinai.
They
didn't
yeah.
let us see my real medical records.
Yeah, they wouldn't let us see them. They said that she had no right.
Okay.
So they came in, and I told them that she could, view them. I was giving permission, and they said no. They wouldn't let me view them either. They said that I would have to go through the proper channels of going to the medical records department to get them. And at that point, then have to pay for them to be able to see them.
Right.
Well, we needed them right then. We never saw that first nurse ever again in my room. And we were never told anything. I was sent home, I believe, maybe the Friday after I delivered. I had him on a Tuesday. I was sent home on a Friday. I went home for a couple days, and then I went over on the 23rd to his father's house, just for a little bit of bonding, and it was Christmas, Christmas coming up, so we were just going to spend a couple days there. And then on December 24th at 7 a.m., I went to get some Desitin from the living room, and I remember bending down underneath the bassinet and feeling like I was going to pass out. So my first reaction was, okay, well, let's just sit on the floor.
Right.
That's the last thing I remember at that point. My child's father had heard a thud, so he came into the living room and he found me on the floor. He picked me up, put me, up in the seat, and I had awoke. I heard a baby crying. I said, "Why is there a baby crying? Whose baby is that?" I didn't know I had a baby at that moment.
Right, because you were just at that point lost so much oxygen, you didn't know what was going
I
on.
had no clue. The only thing I remember from that morning was, like I said, laying down. I don't remember that whole conversation there. He called 911. He called my mother. By God's grace, the EMT showed up quick, because it was all about minutes at that time, seconds
absolutely.
at that time.
Yeah.
They loaded me into the ambulance. The only thing I remember from that point was when I'm in the back of the ambulance, I do remember my mother pulling up and jumping out of her car, going straight into the house, obviously to go get my son. And I don't remember anything else. But on the way to the hospital, I suffered a massive seizure. One that scared the EMTs so bad. The one that was riding in the back with me didn't think I was going to make it. They get me to the ER. same hospital that I had delivered at. And I go into cardiac arrest. So they got me back there, and the ER saved me. They shocked me back to life because the EMTs got me there quick enough. Everyone acted quick enough, moved fast enough. Shocked me back to life, but then they had to, incubate me. And I was in ICU, and I was unconscious from basically 7 a.m. that morning when I dropped until 4 p.m. Christmas Day, so a day and a half. My family in that time had been called back, told to not expect me to pull through and to start making plans on what was going to happen with my son. They had put up signs and pictures of my son in the ICU room in case I did wake up with his name, because they were afraid that I wasn't going to know who my son was. Because the last thing I had said was, "Who is that baby? Why is he crying?" I had no clue at that point. So they were so fearful that when I woke up, I wasn't even going to know I had a child, which was a dream come true to me. I had always wanted one. Here I am, 38 years old, my first child, and lo and behold, going to be my last child. But the blessing, like no tomorrow, When I woke up, what I remember is the doctor coming in, the heart doctor coming in, and telling me that I was suffering from peripartum cardiomyopathy and preeclampsia. Both things missed.
That's what I had. Yeah, preeclampsia and peripartum cardiomyopathy.
Which preeclampsia normally leads into peripartum cardiomyopathy.
Right, which is why we needed the SFLT1 and the PIGF, which is what Dr. Fett, James Fett, says every single day.
Right.
Every day. NT-proBNP test, SFLT1, and the PIGF.
Yes, bless Dr. Fett for all of his hard work on everything. Without him, we wouldn't be where we are today. And we still have a long way to go on all that.
Yeah.
My doctors told me that my heart was only functioning at 30%, and that there was going to be a possibility of needing a heart transplant if medications didn't work.
Right, and the statistics is PPCM is responsible for 1 in 20 heart transplant in the U.S. when it's all preventable as early as 10 weeks pregnant with the NT-proBNP test awareness. And you almost had to be put on that list.
Right.
Were you put on that list?
No, luckily, we didn't end up having to do that. They did some more testing on me. They got me on my meds. I was in ICU for a week. My baby was having to be brought in for me to see so that I could try to have some sort of relationship. When I dropped on the 24th, my sister was called in Texas. She got on a flight on December 24th, last minute flight, dropped everything she had, her own family, flew out, and raised my son for the first month.
So that's who was your support?
Her, my mother, my family, they were all of my support. Without them, I don't know how I would have made it through anything. My son's father, he was there too, but really it came down to being, my family that was the big support system.
Sure.
So like I said, my sister came out. She helped with everything that first month. My family had no idea what any of my plans were, and I didn't have a memory at that point to really be able to tell them what was supposed to be happening.
Right.
So they, went ahead and had us go back to his dad's house, which was not my home. And my sister went there also for that month. So after ICU, they came in, they told me, "Hey, here's this life vest. You're going to need to wear this."
Which actually you can't buy, right? You have to rent.
Right, you have to rent it.
And it was, I think, right now we're helping, it's $5,000 for 3 months, and you can't own it. You have to, you can't buy it. You have to rent it and then give it back after spending $5,000.
And so
That's
if you
entrapment.
So if you don't have an insurance that picks that up, sometimes it's going to be impossible.
Oh, it's over 5,000. It's almost, I think it was out of pocket. It was a ridiculous amount of money, and it's like this could have all been prevented
Right.
with the BNP test.
Right. That
As early,
the
the
NT-Pro
BNP test as
Pro
early as 10 weeks pregnant. So,
which is what I am advocating to get the NT-Pro BNP, into the gynecology field so that other pregnant mothers, other children, other families don't have to go through this.
Exactly.
They don't have to go through what we've gone through.
that's our goal.
It's a simple blood
Developing
test.
this pregnancy movement. We are developing this. It's not a movement yet. We're developing it.
Right.
To raise the lab screening and testings for all pregnancies, EKG, NT-proBNP test, and chest x-rays as mandatory and mandated as early as 10 weeks pregnant, following after, because everything exacerbates and PPCM peaks after pregnancy.
Right, and that's something that I, in that first week when I was in ICU, I lost 60 to 70 pounds of fluid.
Same with me.
I was back to my pre-pregnancy weight. I hadn't gained any weight at all due to being pregnant. It was all fluid. I was completely drowning from my fluid.
I've been 105 pounds my entire life as a dancer. When I gave birth, I was 197 pounds. When I coded 3 months after giving birth, I was almost 113 pounds. 213 pounds, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
213 pounds. And now, I fluctuate because of the fluid, but I was drained over about 40 to 50 pounds of, I don't even know, he knows how much I was drained. But I wasn't, and they kept, saying nutrition, and I'm like,
it wasn't
how
nutrition.
It had nothing to do with nutrition. I'm basically a nutrition specialist, if you want to call me that, because I've been so healthy my entire life. To my times of death called, within the time that I got pregnant to the time that I had my death called, I look, you got the two photos next to it. I look like I've been a dancer, fitness person my entire life, holding my baby in the pool. You could literally roll me out.
Right.
And it was awful. I remember my husband, we were driving home from Arizona, Phoenix, who saved my life. And he put his hand on my knee. And he was like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "That's my knee." And he's like, "Oh," because he couldn't feel it the entire time I was pregnant because I was so swollen.
Right.
So that fluid is what the disease is. It's a fluid disease that crushes the heart. People always think, "Oh, well, I had never had a heart problem prior," but we don't have heart problems.
No.
Our heart is affected, and the cause.
The fluid buildup and the fact that it has started to crush the heart, basically.
Right, which creates it to enlarge and weaken. And so it's not a heart problem. It's a fluid problem that's left undiagnosed that turns into an infectious disease that ends up suffocating and drowning you until death, when it's all preventable.
Right. And, I will say it is not founded or anything, but I will say to this day that my son is the reason we are both still here today. Stem cells from a fetus are sent to a failing organ. I guarantee you I was in heart failure prior to delivery.
Same. I just learned this, actually. You just educated me on this, because I don't know how I lived. I really don't. I don't know how I woke up from cardiac death. You had cardiac death.
Yes. And luckily it was after, 6 days after he had been born. Because had this happened while I was still pregnant with him, one of us wouldn't be here.
Absolutely. And that's how I feel about Liam and I. One of us wouldn't be here. And I have nothing but respect for women that overcome one day going into the next day with ever being diagnosed with this disease, because the frustrations that we have as women of not being listened to during our, our suffering. And we're finally taken serious when our lives are at a threat. And really, we don't have a chance of survival if about timing, like you said. It's all about the timing. When I had cardiac death, I was already in bed with my son when I finally had my stroke and my seizure, and he had to pull me on the floor and give me CPR. And it was like 3 months after giving birth to my son, I already went to the hospital a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And
if you would have been pregnant, they couldn't have shocked you back to life. One of you would have died.
Right. I believe that I was holding on as long as I humanly possibly could. The fact that I lasted 3 months, gaining 2 pounds almost every 3 days until cardiac death, over 200 pounds.
Right.
When I'm 5 foot on my best day and 105 pounds my entire life.
Right.
There was something wrong. They kept saying nutritionist. They had me pricked.
And I was an athlete. I grew up playing sports. I was an all-state softball player. About a year before I was pregnant, I was in Taekwondo. So
you were healthy.
I was healthy. When I hit 135 pounds, I'm only about 9% body weight.
Right.
So when I'm not, doing sports and stuff like that, I'll range from 150, 160. I'm a little bit higher right now because I'm calling it the COVID 15 instead of the freshman 15.
Yeah.
For some reason, COVID made me start eating like crazy. Mm-hmm. But, typically I'm about 150, 160, and that's a very healthy number for me. You wouldn't tell. You'd look at me and think I'm more about 125, 130. So it is what it is. But I don't want to not talk about the fact of the Life Vest.
Yes, let's get back to the Life Vest.
The Life Vest was so difficult for me. And that is one of the things that puts you into, as I call it, peripartum cardiomyopathy depression. The Life Vest is needed to keep you alive.
Absolutely.
However, with the Life Vest...
I had a defibrillator, but...
And so, yeah, yours was there.
I was allergic to it, so they had to remove it. I was allergic to the components of the metals.
Well, and the Life Vest is a temporary thing, so that if you do recover, you don't, but if you don't recover, then they will go into further steps like that. Yeah. Because it is a pack that you have to wear. You can't get it wet. You can't anything like that.
Because what would happen?
You would shock yourself.
Like electrocuted shock?
Yes.
Are you freaking kidding me? What if you sweat?
So, well, it just... Sometimes it would give you a warning that it was going to go off, but then you could stop it if you're not really going to, there's a way to stop it.
Oh, my gosh.
Okay. But I lived with this fear of this Life Vest and a newborn baby that I had. I was afraid to hold my son. I couldn't sleep, in the same bed with my son. For the first 5 months of his life, I didn't get to bond with him like I should have. Because if that Life Vest would have gone off and he would have been in my arms,
you could have shocked him.
He would have died. The shock would have killed him. There would have been no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
So you're paying $5,000 for 3 months to possibly shock and kill your baby.
But to be able to shock myself back to life if I drop, there is a button with a Life Vest that it will start to alert you that it's going off, because sometimes it can try to want to, misfire off of readings or whatever. So if you are going to drop, you're not going to be able to hit that button.
Well, that's what I was going to say. How could you hit the button? Like, wait a minute, let me stop dying for a second and push the button.
That's what I'm saying. So you can't. And so to me, I was just too afraid to hold my son like I wanted to do what I wanted with my son.
Right.
Because I was afraid that I would kill him.
Right.
If something happened and I dropped again, that he would die.
Right.
So I didn't get to bond with my child like I should have.
Neither did I.
And that's what I call that peripartum cardiomyopathy depression that plays onto it.
Sure.
You get the post-traumatic stress from, in some cases, like both of us, we did drop dead.
Right.
And we were lucky enough to be shocked back to life. But then I had to go home with that defibrillator, that Life Vest, and that just made it horrid. after I finally got that life vest off and my meds did work, the first heart check I got was my heart was back up to 45, 50, which is great because I use the analogy with EFs of when I was at 30%, a really good functioning heart is basically 65 to 70.
Yeah.
You do not want above 70.
Right.
So imagine
70 is bad.
Imagine driving down the freeway and the speed limit is 65 and you're only going 30. That's what my heart was doing.
Right.
I was going to get run over and killed basically if it didn't get better.
Right.
Got up to 45. I didn't have to wear the life vest anymore. Thank you. It was the most amazing feeling to be able to get rid of that life vest and be able to start holding my son. But it didn't take away my fear and my traumatic, depression that I had.
Yes.
I was afraid to go anywhere one-on-one with my child.
Right.
Because what if something happened to me? What if I drop again? Just because technically I'm, back up here to 45, 50, if something happens and my child is too young to be able to do anything, too young to be able to get help, it petrified me.
Yeah.
It wasn't until maybe 8 months ago that I finally started to get out of that and I started to get better with my mentality of everything, and that we are finally starting to do things, me and him.
Right.
And we're finally starting to really live life and enjoy life together. Because it held me back for so long. So the one thing that I will
I'm still not. I mean, like, it's for me, it's been really, I mean, I don't know if what I'm trying to say is we're never going to go back to the way we were.
No.
And this has completely changed us forever. And it's okay, to have those moments to feel, because we were robbed of a very joyful moment. I relate with everything that you're saying and then some. You had an external defibrillator. I had an internal defibrillator.
Right.
I couldn't hold my baby because I was in so much pain. I couldn't hold him. There were things that happened to me during my heart failure before I even knew I was having heart failure that could have literally hurt my son tremendously long term.
Right.
And I have a lot of feelings towards that as well. I feel like, these conversations are so important because it's a catastrophe that is preventable with a simple blood test that costs under $15 to $15 max, covered by insurance, and nobody has ever even heard of it. Obstetricians, they say are the ones that, have the awareness. The doctor at, UCLA, I've been trying to find an obstetrician actually that has any awareness for 5 years. And I did find one that didn't have the awareness. She's heard of it, but she was willing to learn. And so she cared. So, a good doctor is a doctor that listens and cares. So I think she's fabulous.
And that is key right there.
She's wonderful. But that took 5 years of not just me researching. I was in a, they called it a all in gynecology and everything. They put out a blast. And it took 2 years for somebody to come through. 2. Right. And Dr. Axelrod in Agora Hills, he's my internal medicine doctor. He's the one that actually found her for me. But him and his team, they're saying, we're still trying. We haven't found anybody yet, And so I'm sitting here kind of like not laughing, ha ha, like funny, not funny. Whereas I've been looking for 5 years and I expect this man to find it for me in like what? I'm on what? And so, the fact that, you've had this experience that literally caused you a depression that, I'm sorry, it's one of these things where I feel like it's going to be endless with us because there's no justice.
Right.
Because the reason why we feel like that there's no justice is because it happened and it shouldn't have.
It shouldn't have.
It's 2022.
But the reason that, I believe that it happened to me and that I'm still here is to try to bring awareness.
And you're sitting right here.
I went back
Yes.
8 months later, spoke with my OBGYN, took him in paperwork about peripartum cardiomyopathy, and tried to educate him.
Were they willing?
He sat in there with me. I mean, and
Wonderful.
this man had a hard time because he didn't intentionally do this.
No.
It was just missed, and he had said that in his career he had only seen one other case in his 40 years of being an OBGYN.
But the thing is that
He's probably
there could
seen
have been-
others,
yeah.
but he just didn't
He didn't
realize
know because it was not diagnosed.
it. And
So
it didn't get to the point that it got to with me necessarily.
Right. If you did not make it, he would have never have known.
Probably not. And if I didn't, he did come back in, he was called in during that week of ICU. So he was aware of what was going on. But a lot of people wouldn't have gone back and even talked to him. It took me 8 months and I scheduled an appointment with him so I could go back in. I could try to educate him and try to bring awareness. And that's what it is. It's awareness. We all need to be aware. We all need to advocate for ourselves. But just because we're aware doesn't mean that you need to be scared. It just means that you need to do your homework.
Yeah, I always say, when I try educating the wheelhouse birth keepers, they call themselves now. I say, this information, I know it's not joyful and holistic, but it's not to scare, it's to be aware. And when did informative, life-saving, educational information become fearful? When did education become fearful? When medicine is about practice. And here we have a study of women all over the world that are now coming through saying, I have suffered from women that are 30 years recovered, because once you're recovered, you can live a long life, to women that are now 23 years old still coming through and having the exact same words, the exact same experience, which means there was exactly nothing that has been done to support women's heart health, women's wellness, delivering babies, because America has zero diagnosis in gynecology. What is it? I mean, we don't have a baby and go to a cardiologist.
No, we don't.
And I've been hearing more and more every day. And even a woman who actually, she saved my life. She was the one that coordinated the doctor to remove my defibrillator on February 14, 2018. And her daughter, she is like part of the board of the Barbara Streisand Women Heart Association program and UCLA, and she does and coordinates everything. And she can't get her daughter an NT-proBNP test. She has been turned down. I even have it on a text. She's been turned down. So I gave her Dr. Axelrod's. I said, go to him, tell him I referred. They will not deny her the test because they know, they support the awareness. And so, but it took her almost 3 months. And here she saved my life. And I actually contacted her the other day and I said, how's your daughter? Did she have the test? And she says, no, she's been turned down. So they're turning down women. She even went to a obstetrician, which they say that's where you're supposed to go. She was turned down the NT-proBNP test. I have that right on my on my message, and that's what's scary.
Right.
But a feline cat has the SNAP NT-BNP that you could do at home that looks like a pregnancy test. Ironically, how ironic is that? So I'm really confused why once educated, once learning about this informative, life-saving information about a simple blood test, which is the only diagnosis for peripartum cardiomyopathy, PPCM, except for preeclampsia, is the SFLT1 and the PIGF, which is the cardiotoxic mixed with the placental growth factor tests. It's not given in the ERs. It's not given anywhere. I know Dr. Fett mentions it all the time, but it's not available. So if the labs and the blood labs don't have the kits and the instruments. And the doctors are not going to provide the NT-proBNP test because they say they're pregnant, not heart failure, but they are pregnancy-induced heart failure. It makes no sense, which why it needs to be mandated for the new standard and get rid of the old handbook, textbook, whatever book, and get with the 2022 times, and let's stop dying like it's the 1800s. Because I say this every time, it's almost as like women have been giving birth since the beginning of time. This should be an ancient conversation. It's 2022, and I'm sitting with young, beautiful women who have suffered cardiac death because they were never diagnosed, never treated until a life threat. This is what needs to change for women's health and wellness moving forward, for women's heart health. This is what needs to be focused. This is what needs to be collaborated, not just in the medical community, but in every home. Because self-advocacy is what we have to rely on when it's not mandatory. We are not cared for. We are not provided for. We are not listened to. So we have to self-advocate. But if the test was mandatory with all those other 50 other blood panels, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Correct. So we definitely need that NT-proBNP. That is something we definitely need in the pregnancy field. But until that time comes,
we rely on the NT-proBNP
until that time comes, we rely on ourselves.
Self-advocacy.
We have to. We know our bodies better than anyone else. So don't be like me and be told everything's fine. It's normal pregnancy symptoms when you know everything isn't fine.
Or like me, I was told on my discharge papers at the ER 7 days before my cardiac arrest, literally says she is not ill.
Advocate for yourself and make sure that you get the help you need. Because if you don't get the help you need, you may not be lucky like Lindsay and I were. You may not be sitting here today, and your little one may not make it either. So just push and push to get the treatment that you need to get.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for today. I really, really appreciate you coming out here. I know it was, a drive, and, I feel like, your magic minute today is going to, translate into a new, hopefully, era of pregnancy awareness. And I truly believe that you and I are, we're in this fight together. They say warriors fight for what they believe in.
Right.
We believe in the NT-proBNP test.
Definitely.
We believe it would have saved us from having to have suffered the symptoms if the condition was treated and cured.
Exactly, because not everyone's little one was strong enough to be able to keep them going.
Absolutely.
And like I said, my blessing was that my son, when he was my fetus, was strong enough to keep that heart going.
That's
until he was gone.
Yeah.
And once he was delivered, it was 6 days later that I dropped. I have no doubt in my mind that my little angel, my little baby boy, was what kept us both alive.
And I feel like that was like with Liam too. I would have soft baby Mozart or the piano guys, and I would have very lightly over my belly, just like music, light instrumental music, and just had them over my belly, and I would just just saying, oh, I hope you don't feel what I feel. I hope you don't feel. I hope you're okay. Checking his brain, checking his heart, checking this. I checked everything except for me.
And the reality is that, he was the one keeping you going.
He was.
And you weren't even aware of that.
And I said to my husband, he's the perfect baby inside of me, And I remember I was like, I don't want him to leave my body the day that I had to have a C-section. I said, I think that if I had a feeling like once he leaves my body, I'm going to die.
But it was a blessing he did. because
Yeah.
he needed to leave at that point.
Oh yeah, he was 41 weeks pregnant. My doctor was in Hawaii. I don't know. Last time I saw her, before that time, she got hit in the face with a ski pole. That's when I knew. I was like, something's not, something's got to give. This girl travels too much. I did meet all the other doctors in East and West Tower, but nobody had any awareness and nobody knew to like even check me. I mean, they're looking at my charts. They see I'm gaining weight and that I'm telling her I'm barely eating. Like I wasn't even hungry. Like I had to force myself to eat.
Awareness is key. There's cases like this all over the world, all over the nation. But unfortunately in my hometown, we have a lot going on. And it's unfortunate that, I wasn't strong enough to be able to tell my story right immediately after it happened. Because 4 months later, we did lose a local girl and we did lose her baby.
Yeah.
So my goal is that this, we'll just go ahead and start waking up.
Well, that's why I started this platform in this docuseries, because I've been like waiting for somebody to do it, waiting and waiting and waiting. And then what happened was Leah at Cedar Sinai, November 21st, 2021, this past November, she died after childbirth, after giving childbirth at the same hospital. And I'm like, they're not listening. They're not listening to when, Kara Johnson, that whole, Judge Hatchett, her daughter-in-law, she died after childbirth there. Same year that I coded. They're not learning because from what the high-risk management team was, they delayed it, they pushed me. They don't want anything that's not perfect.
Right. And like I said, it's something that is going to stick to me, knowing now what I know and knowing that, Dominguez did pass away at such a young age.
Demi?
Yeah.
Demi Dominguez?
Yeah, you interviewed her mother a few weeks ago.
Tracy.
I was still in a life vest at that point, and I had no idea what was even going on. And like I said, I still am just getting some of my memory back on some things.
Oh, so you were actually feeling guilty about Demi's passing?
I do. I do feel bad because I feel like if I would have been able to get out there right off the bat and got some awareness out, and maybe somebody could have heard it, maybe her mom would have heard it, maybe her family would have heard what happened, but I myself was a shell. I was a shell of a body. I was in a life vest. I didn't have any comprehension at all what this was still.
Right.
And I'm still learning about it every single day.
Because you're from Bakersfield, California.
As well, yes.
As well, so you were in the same. And recently, I just got she didn't make, I don't think where's my phone? Well, whatever. But yeah, it was the same situation, that just happened. I'm talking to the head of labor and delivery at Memorial, at Kern, in Bakersfield, and they had whereas I said, listen, I got a woman, she's 41 weeks pregnant, her baby, he's baked, he needs to come out. And it was so sad. They just had no awareness and they released her.
Yeah.
And then she passed. So it's like, it's not fair.
I'm not very familiar with that story, but
it's not.
But the Dominguez story is
it's all in
definitely
Bakersfield.
Definitely a very sad one, especially being she was so young.
Yeah.
So young. Her family didn't need to go through that. My family didn't need to go through what they went through, but the Dominguez family definitely didn't, and my condolences definitely go out to them.
I know, me too. I love Tracy. I hope she, her fight is, I fight with her fight, and so does consumer watchdog Michelle as well. They're doing everything they can just to get, it's just even like respect for maternal mortality that should not even exist anymore because there's preventions. I mean, this is like unacceptable to the point where we demand change at this point, which is why you and I are,
Right.
you know,
Because this isn't fair. It's not fair to anyone, not even my age, not your age, but it's definitely not fair for
no, look at
our
Kelsey
19-year-olds who she was 19.
Yeah.
It's not fair to our 20, 21, 22, 23-year-olds. It's not fair to anyone, but to our young girls
Well, this is a
who
young,
are just
healthy
getting
disease.
who are just getting started in life.
Yes, not fair.
It's not fair.
Well, it's not fair because it's preventable, and
They have a whole life ahead of them.
Yeah, it shouldn't even happen. And then what? They're not going to have another child at like what in like 10 years? They'll still be like 25. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I mean, at least in my case, having going ahead and having a hysterectomy a year later wasn't that huge of a deal because I was already 39 when I finally had the hysterectomy. And I had been told I wouldn't make it through another pregnancy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I know. I
And
know.
I couldn't do that to my son.
Right.
So,
And
but
feel the
to
same.
imagine being 20 years younger than me and having to go through this.
And not having the coping skills of life, because as we mature, like I feel like if I went through this when I was 18, I wouldn't have the coping life skills that I have today.
Right, and then to have the support.
And
I mean, I had family support like no other. You had your husband, who is
Oh
amazing.
yeah, no, he
and
he did everything. I mean, I couldn't. I was in a coma, so he fed the baby. He changed the baby. He did everything, and that really put me as you. I wanted to be a mom my entire life, so they took that one opportunity from me, and that's where I'm like, okay, it's not their fault, like you say, like your doctor, like he didn't know, but it is, because there has been awareness for over 30 years that this has been a problem, or they wouldn't have made the NT-BNP for a cat.
Yeah, well, I'm not here, I don't believe that I was brought back in life to put blame on anyone. I think that I was brought back in life to bring awareness and to help this not happen to somebody else in the future.
Yeah.
So I don't blame,
And
I don't blame anyone for anything that happened to me. It's unfortunate what happened to me, but I really truly believe that I'm still here to bring awareness and to try to help prevent this from happening to anyone else.
Well, you're a better woman than I, because I have to say, I'm still not evolved. I'm not that evolved yet. I love to spread awareness, but women are still dying around me and suffering, and so I'm not playing a blame game, but once a medical community is educated with this information, it's careless not to apply it, and that's why I say there's blame, because there has been awareness for many, many years, but it hasn't been applied. The BNP test, NT-Pro, has not been applied. So I find that careless. And for me, what I've learned is what we don't know can hurt us. And when there's other people that do know and that are aware, and they're not spreading that awareness, that's where I have a hard time. So
I do understand, but that's why I said I'm here for awareness. I'm not here for a blame game. I'm here to bring awareness, to help educate, and to help try to prevent another young girl, another family,
right,
or another baby ever having to go through this.
Absolutely.
And that's why I truly believe that I'm still here today, because, a higher power knew that I would be making, strides, and I would be making efforts.
Hence, you're sitting here talking to me on the only platform that's available out there for peripartum cardiomyopathy, PPCM. So you are doing exactly what you are.
And this is what was, it's definitely needed in my hometown. So, there was not awareness when it happened to me. There was not awareness.
Is there awareness now?
To the Dominguez family. That is something that I'm actually working on currently.
Okay.
I do have a few things getting ready to happen here over the next few months there locally. So I'm trying to bring awareness as much as possible to the local community, to our medical fields, and to just women and families in general. So that, like I said, you don't have to be scared, but you need to be aware.
Yes, and we designed a PowerPoint presentation and visually with graphs that describe that we will put onto the website. But we have we've been working hard on that for the last few weeks of doing something very visual, which we have. We also included Dr. James Fett, the SFLT1 and the PIGF, and for it to be broken down. I did post it today, along with the YouTube, because I think it's very important to have medical backup. And Dr. James Fett is,
An amazing man.
he is the person that has been advocating for women and proving, and actually says it is medically proven, and they have proven this, that no woman should ever suffer or die from peripartum cardiomyopathy, PPCM. And so with that, there is no reason for maternal mortality to exist. And moving forward, yes, spreading the awareness and having the education along with self-advocacy is where we are starting, moving forward from here on out. Again, there isn't really anybody to blame, but moving forward, we do need to educate others, and in hopes that it will be applied in the medical community once educated. This way, we won't have careless cardiac arrests and careless deaths that should not ever exist anymore in 2022 for women that are pregnant. So thank you so much for your time, and I just appreciate your time. I know you can spend it any way you want, and you chose to spend it here.
Well, thank you for the platform, and let's go kick some PPCM ass.
Absolutely.